Welcome, Samir. It's a huge pleasure to invite you for our, off-the-cuff chat series. We've been working together for the last 4 years or so. You're one of the earliest advisors, investors in Symmetry. Very thankful for the support, and it's a great opportunity to catch up on what you've been up to lately. So, without further ado,
Yeah, thank you. It's been great to be part of this journey with you. Data security has evolved so much since we started talking. I want to say 4.5 years ago, outside of a Whole Foods in downtown Austin. And my journey has also been kind of, it's been a metamorphosis of roles and activities that I've worked on. Um, yeah, no, I'm excited to be here.
wonderful. So, just for our audience to kind of have them catch up, we'd love to hear your story arc. You've been on big companies, so you've been a founder. Just take us through how you got started in cybersecurity and
Yeah.
to today.
No, it's a great question. I look at myself as non-traditional, but then I've seen so many CISOs that have come from even more non-traditional backgrounds. So I was in tech, but I was never, I didn't grow up as an ethical hacker. I wasn't tinkering to break stuff as much as a lot of my peers did. I also feel like I was leaning more towards the GRC risk side initially, just because that's where I got my first couple of opportunities. SOX 404 back in the day, if you remember, required IT auditors. So started there, got an opportunity to follow a boss, uh, um, and he gave me the opportunity to run a AppSec team. And then with that came some SecOps, exposure and learnings and management. And been a CISO a few times, but then got the itch to do a startup. I'd advised enough startups, including I think yours was one of the early ones that I started working with. But I had an itch to do a startup and jumped in both feet in versus kind of helping from the outside, and that was a lot of fun. But I'm back now after 3.5 years to doing CISO work. I'd say vCISO consulting, advising, helping companies with their security posture, with both learnings from both sides. If that makes
Amazing.
sense.
I have a feeling there's another startup somewhere in the
Maybe,
near future. Yes,
maybe.
yes. And it's really interesting. So you started from the GRC side, but you also have seen companies of different shapes and
Yeah,
sizes. Um, could you kind of take us through that?
that's a great question. I mean, look, when you come from financial services, you expect the level of investment we get in financial services to be symmetrical, if you will, with other companies if they're smaller or bigger, but they still have the same risk profile. But actually, the risk profile is very different for financial services versus, say, a distribution company versus, an FMCG player, etc. Right? So I had a lot of learnings there in what to expect in terms of budget and what is the risk profile, and then the kind of people that come work for certain companies, right?
I see.
The value system, etc.
I see.
But I've seen a lot of different, let me say, maturity levels,
I see.
and from that perspective, what is good enough, right?
That's amazing.
It really varies.
That makes sense. Is there any sort of short punchline takeaways in terms of, hey, if you're in
Yeah,
financial, this is what I saw of the top three FMCGs, top three,
yeah, yeah.
distributor?
I don't know if there's a top three, Mohit, but what I'll say is what I realized, which was very interesting, is a financial services company or a fintech, doesn't matter where in the world they have a very similar approach, three lines of defense, um, kind of a hybrid operating model where the CISO does get a lot of visibility to the board, right? So even though they are reporting to a CTO, CIO, um, or another leader in the company like a COO, they still get a dotted line to the board. That's not always the case, right? When you look at FMCG, it might have changed more now. Like if you look at um, a grocery chain, for example, like a Whole Foods, I think there's a lot more visibility for a CISO. But generally, that's one. The second thing I'll say is that the investment level, right? So um, I think in less targeted companies outside of the healthcare and the fintech, right? And maybe to some extent technology. But with technology, what's interesting is tech companies will have security baked in to the engineering teams, right?
Yeah.
So it could be that in a tech company, you have a CISO that has everybody report to him or her
Yeah.
with dotted lines to your, development leaders, right? Or the development leaders might have security specialists who are builders as well, right? So there's that hybrid kind of approach. And in some cases, the security team, I've noticed this in some tech companies, will literally be more of a governance function, right? They'll be the fourth line of defense. They'll do threat modeling and red teaming and pen testing and maybe a data security governance function. But the actual work that happens ends up in engineering, in operations. It's almost like keep it close to the problem, right? Keep it close to the data, right? If you will. So it's very interesting with tech. And I've seen both work very well, just depending on the culture. But financial services tends to have a lot of money to throw at the problem, as you would imagine, and a lot of risk. So they have regulations, they've got global regulations, they've got privacy regulations, all of that, right? So what's interesting with financial services is that I see them buying a lot of products. I'm probably going to get a lot of hate mail for this comment I'm going to make, but it feels like they look at data security and say, well, let's buy somebody for DSPM, let's buy somebody for data privacy, let's buy somebody for data DLP, and let's buy 3 different products for DLP, one in the browser, one in the network, one in the endpoint, right? And so I think that's going to change. And I think, and I will talk more about why I think that's going to change. But again, I think there's been there will be a lot of consolidation, to summarize, in this space. So people are going to get smarter on how they purchase.
So that's really interesting. Your kind of takeaway, well, at least from my point of view, is tech companies are placing a lot of technical talent, what you mentioned as builders, kind of dotted line into the security team, tighter integration of security and the just product building across, right? And what you're saying is that you'll see more of this happen in more regulated, more traditional companies as well, so that the security problem and the people who are building products or data lakes, etc., they're all super tightly integrated.
They're super tightly integrated. The stakeholders no longer, I'm going to sell an endpoint DLP to your endpoint management team. It's going to be, we're going to sell a DLP platform. I'm using DLP as an example, of course. But we need all these stakeholders involved. And I can guarantee you, if you bring the tech mindset, there's going to be a much more robust discussion around build versus buy.
Amazing.
Right?
Amazing. This makes a ton of sense. That I think the theme that you're describing is, it's not let's have one platformization, one platform tool to magically solve problem while looking from the outside. It's much more a matter of integrating security and the rest of the company together to be better stewards of whether it is data or whether it's applications or their customers.
Their customers.
Perfect. Awesome. I had another question for you. You have had such a diverse background. You've done GRC, etc. How come when you decided to push all your chips on the table and build a company, you chose to build it in identity? What's the story there?
Yeah, no, it's, I think taking a step back, right? So taking a step back as a practitioner, right? I looked at the problem that we were faced with, and I said, well, what is the blind spots that security people have, right? Security leaders, security team members. It's not just about the CISO. As CISOs, we tell our teams, we want you to deliver X. But those teams have the difficult job of working across the aisle, right? Democrats, Republicans, independents, and saying, hey, I have this visibility. What do you have? And identity teams at the time, and even now to some extent, report into infrastructure. So the gap between the shared knowledge, maybe it's platform related, maybe it's process related, maybe it's a mismatch of ownership in a RACI that's, kind of out of date, was the identity teams would traditionally, I don't even know if we'd call them identity teams, they'd be infrastructure teams that would set up, your Okta or your constructs for authentication. And authorization would be this kind of this gray area where it'd say, well, we don't understand the business functionality of Workday. So let's sit in a room, infrastructure team. Security can come in and say, well, we'd like SOD, but there's no real magic
SOD
playbook. Sorry, SOD is segregation of duties. We want to maintain SOD, or we don't want interns to have access to, HR interns to have access to payroll data, whatever the risk reasons they come up with. There'd be a debate from compliance. There'd be like kind of a meeting of the minds. And then they'd set the rules and policies, if you will, within Workday as an example.
Yeah.
And when they walk away, that automatically gets old because somebody will come in and say, well, somebody's out sick.
Yeah.
We need to give them access to that, right? So authorization sprawl is a real problem. And I don't even know if there's one product, including the company that I founded, that can solve all of it. But what I realized was that governance was a problem, identity governance,
Yeah.
identity real-time drift management of permissions,
Yeah.
and tying it back to risk, right? Business risk at the end of the day was really important.
Yeah.
What I learned towards the end, Mohit, was that business risk means what is the data? If I go to a business user and say, hey, legal team, we need to make sure nobody has access to our legal
Yeah.
files, for example, just a broad term. The legal team will say, okay, let's look at all our files and which of those have PII,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. I just think it's all in one or two or three or four repositories. So you just block all and then give access one at a time. So what I'm learning now, going back into the CISO world, is nothing's really changed. When I join a company, I'm still like, can I have access to this? Or can I have access to this SharePoint? Can I get access to this OneDrive? Right? I'm using Microsoft as an example, but it's across the board, right? And so how much time and money are we spending on resources having to go back and forth? And the answer is not, let me get an intelligent AI bot, right, that can look at your behavior. I've heard this example. I've heard enough startups come to me and say, well, we can do real-time AI DLP, which means based on your behavior, you're always looking for these kind of files. So we will magically pick the files you want access to. That's not how the world works, because at the end of the day, people get sick, people get promoted, people change jobs, people work globally, M&A happens. Mm-hmm. So I think the AI angle, which is wonderful, requires a human to drive that intelligence, if that makes sense.
I see. So if I summarize, at least what I took away is that there is authorization sprawl across many different types of services that you have to have access to. And that's one hop. And behind that, there's potentially what assets, what data is there. So the number of people who need to be involved in making this decision as to what is right for the business, what's the right trade-off. It needs too much coordination.
Exactly.
So you're sitting on too much risk because it's hard to keep coordinated. And you're also losing productivity just trying to stay coordinated.
Stay coordinated.
Right?
So to enable people so you don't have friction, right? So what I see is we're trying to find this balance between friction and security, or friction and compliance. Friction meaning like I want to do my job. So let me do my job.
Someone needs to build a new recommender model to increase revenue versus, hey, do I train it on customer PII or not? That's the compliance or security side.
That's a great point. I like that. Yeah, exactly. And I'll take a chance on your podcast here. Maybe we need a new term for this. Maybe all these buzzwords we're throwing around are being thrown around by people who are more in marketing but really not practitioners. Maybe the word, Mohit, is exposure. What's our data exposure? What do we really care about, right? Exposure is a very broad term right now, but maybe we can define it. Maybe it's a combination of, I have a certain posture I want to maintain, but beyond that, if data is exposed, right, I want to be real time in being able to detect it, manage it. And then the recommender model you mentioned, I like that this exposure is okay because it goes to our consulting partners and they need access.
Amazing.
And we do have downstream mitigating controls to make it much more manageable.
Yeah, so I love this concept of data exposure that you mentioned, for example, because I think what I take away from that is you're saying it's not just exposure to which machine. In all your examples, you're saying, sure, I built a recommender model, but who is this model exposed to? So really kind of intentionally tying together identities with data.
Right.
So if I have this type of data, whether it is through OneDrive, whether it is through Snowflake, whether it is through some product environment, in the end, which identities it is exposed to? Is it exposed to contractors or interns or third parties, right? Or which nationalities, etc. Right?
Yeah.
So it's really the exposure, but it's also at a layer that is data meets identity,
Yep.
right? Not just exposure at like, hey, it's exposed outside my VPN or something,
Yeah.
right? I think that's a really powerful idea. We've come across it several times in how we see data security as well.
Yeah.
That really it's not about classifying the data and checking where is it. The answer to where is it, if it's in terms of, hey, it's on this machine or it's on this S3 bucket, it's in this Snowflake dataset, it's meaningless.
Yeah.
What's meaningful is who is it exposed to?
Yeah.
If it's in this dataset, this is a dev dataset that is broadly exposed to all of my partners, all of my contractors and interns. That's the problem.
Yeah.
The problem is not in the name of the bucket or finding the infrastructure asset that it lies in. So I love this concept of intentionally quantifying and dealing with exposure as a first order goal, right? Because you're saying what is being exposed, the asset, and who is it exposed to, which is the identity.
Yeah. No, to add to that, like if you think about 15 years ago, CISOs were mostly concerned about patching, and we get a third-party pen tester, very smart people come in and find exposures to your application. They were not as concerned about the data layer.
Yeah.
They were somewhat concerned about the person or the identity that has access.
Yeah.
And so we said, okay, well, we're concerned about identity, so we'll do MFA, right? Or we'll do, more fine-grained authentication, and then the SailPoints of the world, et cetera, came in and say, we'll do really good governance around user access reviews on a periodic basis. And so we started doing identity from, let's lock the front door, make sure the right person has access, right?
Yeah.
And I don't like the word insider threat because it makes it seem like everybody's a Snowden kind of situation, which is not fair.
Yeah.
It's more of like people make mistakes, right?
Yeah.
Like if I expose a file, I didn't realize that I'm not supposed to expose it.
Absolutely.
Now, do I go back 15 years ago and say, hey, legal team, let's write another policy that anybody in security can do this and everybody in HR can do that? I mean, then people are going to feel constrained, then innovation stops, right? You have to have innovation.
Yeah.
And the word on the street is like, every company is going to be a software company. We heard that, you and I heard that 10 years ago. But I think now it's like every company is going to be an AI company.
Yeah.
Well, what does that mean? Are you going to just wrap stuff around Claude or OpenAI or et cetera? Or are you going to actually build? I think building is coming, right? I think everyone is going to be empowered to build, right?
Absolutely.
So data movements change. And I know we're playing a little whack-a-mole around data.
Yeah.
But eventually I think we'll get a platformization approach to, so different personas can have one place where we can all speak the same language, but also you teach us as a company, as a startup, your goal is to teach us to work on the same language, the same nomenclature, but give us our own little sandboxes to do our work, which is one-time approval for this kind of data for security to do investigations, one-time approval for a third party to get access to legal docs, right?
I love this.
And so this idea of like, we have to bring people together, but we also want to make them feel safe.
Amazing.
It's very interesting. It's a human, I think, phenomenon.
That's awesome, because what I took away from here is you're saying it would be incredibly valuable if we could have a domain-specific language, a DSL, essentially, right? Which is very compact, but also extensible to the needs of the specific org, so that the nouns and verbs in my authorization shouldn't be MongoDB instance ID, blah, 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 has access to this port and this role. And then somehow, somewhere, Alice, the security person, or Bob, the intern, has access. It has to be at a layer of abstraction higher, where you're saying like, hey, this is a security investigation. People should have limited time access to broad classes of data with sort of monitoring seatbelts thrown in. So all of this security widgets are just packed in, but in a very compact statement that the business folks understand.
But I think I don't want to lose the fact that you mentioned a very interesting model, right? With APIs and connectivity and what's MCP now we're talking about, that's the new buzzword of the week, right? I think that is important for the infrastructure people setting up the data flows, right? So yes, you need that. But if you said that to me as a CISO, and I'm not the CISO of big tech, or maybe I haven't grown up in engineering, because a lot of CISOs have grown up like me in GRC and SecOps, detect and respond. You want to flip that script and say, well, one, is that okay, those data flows? The second is the abstracted layer above is the identity layer of that that's congruent with that data layer.
That's right.
Is that lock? Is the seatbelts right? Or maybe you can set your policies.
Yeah.
And then the business user, to your point, who doesn't speak security or tech, is like, hey, is this a business need?
Yeah.
Is there more? Is there less? What are we missing?
That's right.
And that, that audio tuning recommendation engine is absolutely valuable.
Yeah.
But if I'm making a recommendation at the top layer, the downstream impacts need to be well understood, right? So you're right. The seatbelts, I might want yellow seatbelts, you might want red, but we still need seatbelts for the company to be, secure.
Absolutely. That makes sense. And the analogy that I see here is kind of like how PyTorch or TensorFlow coming in really put the ML experts in charge of driving the GPUs.
Nice. Yeah.
As opposed to the ML experts having to learn the GPU programming languages, CUDA, etc., or FPGAs or regular CPU, low-level optimized. That's not their layer. The layer that they want to work with is matrices and tensors, and let's just give them that layer to work with. What's the counterpart for the security people, the governance, risk, compliance people, and the business teams?
Yeah.
Just that the mechanisms in security are abstracted out, but the end goals can be configured.
You nailed it.
That would be amazing. So another question.
I'll drink some water.
Yeah. Yes. I love the point about insider threat.
Overused, scary word, right? Why use that, right? Yeah.
It's like one time Snowden happens, and now every guy walking around is a Snowden. And that's BS.
I know this is on camera, but what I would do is, if you can find a way to get a list of all Forcepoint customers, we'll delete that part. I live in DC. I live in Austin.
So Samir, we also see that you are really active in the community. You help a lot of founders. You're tied with lots of VCs. You have big CISO communities that you're really helpful to. How are you seeing the market at this point in terms of specifically data security?
That's interesting. I haven't spoken to a whole lot of data security companies lately. What I've been hearing is more startups coming at it from, a new age DLP, next gen DLP, next gen. Let's call it. I don't know if it's DSPM. It's. I'm trying to think of the term that came up recently, but there's some other buzz around better encryption, better safety, security. I think it's almost like it's not privacy, but it's data safety plays. Like,
who are you thinking of?
They're stealth companies, so probably don't even remember the names right now. I talk to like every two or three companies a week.
I see. Well, I mean, maybe we can kind of, we don't need to get necessarily people on the bleeding edge of what is about to come. Maybe just kind of even broadly just thinking in terms of, look, there are vendors coming at it from privacy, vendors coming at it from classic security, cloud security.
So I'll start again. So what I see in this space from data security has been, there's a privacy angle, there's a data lineage and workflow angle, like where's my data, who's moving, behavioral aspect of data movements. I've seen people now I'm seeing identity companies talk about, we'll tie data exposure or data exposure back to the user attribution, right? And then there's more of the traditional DLPM players that are trying to infuse some of this with AI, if you will. But there's a number of different kind of entry points people are looking to come into, right? And I feel like, again, we're going back to silos, selling in silos, buyers in silos. And yes, companies that are early stage and even not too late in terms of like journey will be expected to build out the entire platform, right? But my worry is a lot of the folks out there are building stuff for one use case and will have to rebuild everything from scratch, and have not thought about the North Star really well, right? They're thinking about, I'm going to just make my ICP happy. They're calling it the ICP, the ideal customer profile. But I think the ICP is actually ICP alpha, ICP beta, ICP gamma. And eventually all of them are going to become your alphas, because at the end of the day, they all want what they need. And if you don't give it to them, they'll go by another company, right? Or eventually what's going to happen in my mind is that Palo Alto or Zscaler or one of the big players is going to be like, okay, let's just buy 3 companies in this space. Let's have our 1,000-person engineering team make this congruently work together with our, core, whether it's, network firewalls or, endpoint usage, etc. And we'll just have a DSPM kind of platform play, right? Yeah. Or data exposure, where I think we should be headed. But that's kind of what I'm seeing, and it's a tough market to come in with that point solution, especially since Nikesh Arora had that famous blog post around the platform, right? And I think it was a bad quarter for Palo Alto, and he said, you know what, we're playing the long game here, right? And I think we all have to play that long game, right? But for startups, it's exceptionally hard right now, early stage ones especially, to be able to solve this.
Awesome. So now you're gonna ask me that same kind of question. What am I seeing around the
Yeah.
the
So Mohit, let me just flip it back to you, right, a little bit, right? I obviously have been on both sides of the table, but I wasn't building a data security company,
Yeah.
right? You're building a data security company, right? What are you seeing from customers as top of mind? And I'd love to hear this from both a large company and a small company perspective.
Yes, a really good question. The first thing that we are seeing as a major shift that's happening is that the reframing the problem of data security around data meets identity, meaning who is doing what to the data? Do I have contractors accessing customer data in the clear? Are my overseas colleagues accessing data that should be locked down within lower 48 or within US, etc.?
Yeah.
So there are both regulations and also security concerns driving controls over data flows. And I feel like that's the biggest kind of strategic change that I'm seeing, which is that as an asset category, how is data flowing amongst identities? This is directly tied to regulation, tied to incident. So someone gets spearfish, some app service role gets log4j. What customer data is involved in this incident? What data left production? These are questions about data types and identity types. And even more kind of urgently that, the way AI is being rolled out, now you have a co-pilot who acts with your permissions, right? But it's much more aggressive about indexing all the data that you could potentially get to that you are manually not doing, but the co-pilot will do it on your behalf so that it's ready to suggest things, make recommendations, and answer your questions well. So the use of these co-pilots and agents and so on who are proactively running workflows for you is really amplifying the problem of what data flows can happen so that you can proactively get ahead of it, and what data flows did happen so that you can either handle incidents or detect and protect and kind of respond to potential incidents. This is the biggest change that I'm seeing, and this is very different from you have a buzzword central like, hey, let's go classify all your data. So there's a data catalog project for the data lake. There's a data loss prevention DLP project for the corporate environment. And then there's some sort of encryption key management project for your product environment, like KMS and all these things. So these are all sort of like kind of tools that are being used for very specific use cases. But if you just step back and at a large company level, ask, hey, tell me, can my contractors, this is an example, in India, access my financial data that should be locked in the US?
Yeah.
You have to traverse the LDAP, AAD, LDAP, things like this. And now you have OCR documents or financial report, right?
Yeah.
All these things lying around, and you have to be able to answer this question as simply as possible.
Sure.
And you can't do that, right? The Signal example just now, sure, it's end-to-end encrypted, great key management, but I added the wrong person into the group.
Oh man.
Right? This happens all the time.
Yeah.
So this problem at a global scale, when you have to answer across Active Directory, cloud permissions, data store permissions, and just tell me that can Alice the contractor access financial data is borderline impossible. So this is why I think the new approach of like just making the data identity connection explicit, right, is powerful because it kind of makes a lot of these prior works really unnecessary over a longer time horizon. Right now, compliance checklists make sure that you need it, but longer time, this will all kind of go away.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm seeing. But for the smaller companies, the bigger opportunity is, sure, you can kind of set yourself up right reasonably quickly because visibility is not that hard. If you're in a small company, the big opportunity there is you can actually automatically synthesize controls.
Yes.
Meaning you can set up a policy at a high level that, look, these type of colleagues can have access to this type of data, like who gets access to production data for what time window, for what purpose. But then you can sort of synthesize the infrastructure using Terraform, using auto-generated IAM policies, spin up resources that are locked, and then those resources will get auto-destroyed. So now you are set up to not just get visibility, but also control by construction. And imagine if you are a small company and you grow up like that, you will ideally not find yourself in a state where the current Global 2000 find themselves where, hey, I grew up with 20 M&As, I'm all over the world, I don't even know what data I have, and keep getting surprised by who put this in this open data lake, right?
Yeah.
You can synthesize, and to me, this is almost like the difference between going from punch card programming to Python programming.
Makes sense.
Right? You're not handling this legacy complexity you're synthesizing. So that's how I see it, at least for big companies and small companies. With big companies, you gain visibility so that you can affect strategic changes. With small companies, you can actually build and engineer those controls. You don't have to, kind of just do detection and then coordination and then response.
Makes sense. I think, Mohit, the other question that came up in my head while I was thinking about now that I'm back in the practitioner seat is the buzz around non-human identities, right?
Yeah.
So how does data security change, if any, right? The strategy of a product company like yours with non-human identities involved.
So this is a really good question because non-human identities, it is not trivial to figure out who those are. We see this going back to the big company setting. A lot of times employees will set up tools like Metabase, Tableau, some service role batch job under their own name. Now they left the company, they got offboarded. So now there is a human identity that is running a service job, and it's actually a non-human identity in disguise. Or you might have a non-human identity that was an explicitly set up service role or set up as an application identity that does some jobs like the ETL pipeline or something like this. And a third category that I'm seeing now is you have a co-pilot who assumes your identity, the human identity, and is aggressively indexing the customer or the environment that you're in. So these are all different types of identities. You could brand them as non-human identities, but I don't think that framing is really helpful in terms of solving the underlying three problems. Because these three problems are just three filters on the data flow graph that we just talked about, where data meets identities.
Right.
Right.
That makes sense.
Even if you offboarded the person, I should be able to see, like, why is this offboarded in AD identity, their counterpart in GCP still running some job in a recurrent manner?
Got it.
Right? Or why is their co-pilot going and indexing data that should not have been visible to them in the first place? Right? Or why is it that this application service role is now all of a sudden moving new data out of production? To me, these are all the data identity graph data flow problem in disguise.
I see. But Mohit, on that topic, right, if you think about it, I struggle with attribution of shared accounts, owners, when people leave those, right?
Yes.
So I think you're calling out a very valuable point, which is I might not know that Mohit has access through other avenues, not just the Mohit at Symmetry-Systems account, right? I think the data graph can kind of reverse engineer that and say, let's start with the data.
Yeah.
And let's look backwards and say,
absolutely.
Even this whole idea of CASB, right?
Yes.
Is it CASB? Not CASB, sorry. CASM.
CASM. Yeah.
I get caught up in all the various acronyms. So CASM, it's like asset management, right? Yeah. Well, if you don't know your data, how do you know your asset is important? Absolutely. So I see CASM companies struggling. I see a few identity governance companies struggling because I think till you start with the foundational aspect,
that's right.
Right? You can't go upstream and say, well, which are the 7 microservices I need to lock down?
Absolutely, 100%. So I fully agree.
Mohit, I had a question that is kind of a double-edged sword. It's like I'm asking you to look into the future. I'm asking you to be hypothetical, and I know you're a PhD with an engineering background. You're a builder. You've built a great company already. But if I was to give you $1 billion of investment, right, like some crazy number, and say, Mohit, what's that North Star product you're going to build? What's that audacious goal? Like, what's that disruptive, audacious goal? And I know you've already done a lot of disruption. Don't get me wrong. I'm not belittling any of the work you've done, but I want to know, like, hey, what's the symmetry of our children look like? The legacy that's going to be there with Symmetry.
It's a really good question. So I would work back from like what objective, what outcome we want to see what change we want to see in the world. And for us, a big driving North Star is we should have a world where by default everyone gets their data, their privacy respected, and that we as builders find it natural and easy to be good stewards of our community. By that, I mean, if I'm building an application, it should be natural and easy for me to be respectful of all my users' data while being able to have all the engineering tools and visibility to build a great product, right? I should be able to charge for my services, but how can I not become the focal point of risk? Right now, if I build a SaaS, the natural way to do it is to host everyone's data, and now it's on me and all my employees and all my subcontractors. All of us are on the hook for all of our customers' data. How can we give a different set of technical tools such that, imagine if I'm pushing all my product into a box and everyone's data goes into their own boxes, right? And the box system kind of takes care of providing the securities, a lot of the security, compliance, governance, just all the things you need to be really good stewards, right? Compliance is, again, it's a four-letter word for people, but it's telling developers what people really want. Right? When GDPR comes out or CCPA comes out, they are saying like, hey, I want to have some say in how my data is handled. So short version is, how can we build tools that help builders just be better stewards of our community, of
I
our
love it.
community's data.
I love it. That's great, because what you're saying is that the human at work and the human at home, still the human, right? They're still owners of their own space, if you will, right?
Yes, exactly.
And some of that data is there. Some of that data is maybe proprietary patent data, right? So having the ability, I think, to make engineers do their job better,
Yeah.
right? Having the ability to make the consumer feel safe and secure, but productive,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly.
And so let me ask you this, and this is a trick question.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a trick question. Do you think you'll ever become a consumer company, like a B2C company?
So I think we started actually from a B2C vision.
Oh, really?
The direction for this research in 2011 was around how can every person, like if I think of myself, right, like I have my educational data, all the projects I ever did, I have my health data, I have all my personal photos with my family and friends. How can I have ownership slash some control, some agency over all of this data that I have, right? If I could just carry this forward with me always, and I can import, and the future, to your point around the product, I want to have really deep, analysis of this. Like if an AI tool could analyze all of my deepest personal things and
Yeah.
tell me, here's how to get better at this, that, and the other, that would be amazing.
Yeah.
But
That's fair
today,
enough.
to get that, I have to give up my deepest, most personal data to some app who, under the hood, is repackaging 200 other vendors, who is selling all the data to all sorts of other companies. So-
Brokers and stuff, yeah.
Exactly. So it's not a kind of a nice, respectful place. I don't feel safe putting in all these tools into the deepest, most personal places.
Yeah.
Right.
Perfect.
And if we can build a set of just computer engineering tools, computer science tools that help the builders and that gets people. This is why in the Signal we talked about it earlier, it's such a good, simple app.
Yeah.
It gets you and your device kind of in control over your messages.
Makes sense.
It's not.
Awesome. So Mohit, I had kind of a more personal question for you, right? In the sense of like, I've been through this journey of a startup for 3.5 years. We raised, over $8 million. Getting the money is not even the hardest part. Not building the product also, I feel now, is not the hardest part. It's making your customers delighted, not just thank you for this. You beat all the other vendors we got you, right? The delight, the minimum delightful product, or whatever the term is, right? Maybe I'm answering the question for you, but I'd love to know what keeps you going. You've been at it for 4.5, 5 years. You've built a great company, but what keeps you motivated and going as the CEO of Symmetry-Systems?
I would say two things. One is the North Star that we are chasing. It's how do we build this place that is a better place for all our privacy and data and such. And on much more tactical side, just being able to show customers some outcomes that they didn't see coming potentially, or they didn't believe was feasible in this amount of time, right? And delighting them with that and just staying on top of it. So one of our most proud achievements really is that we've worked with customers and we've grown the investments those customers have made to be 2x year over year, or even more in many cases. So I think customer delight at a very daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly level, that's the fuel, that's the oxygen that keeps the company going.
That's amazing. And I guess just kind of related to that, right? You've been around, you've been doing this for 5+ years. You were a professor. You've taught a bunch of students. Some of the students have followed you into the startup. I've met some of them. It's wonderful. But in this difficult climate, last year was more difficult, I think, right? In terms of post-COVID time. What have you done? What's the advice you can give to aspiring founders that keeps your employees motivated? Because you've had such little turnover. You've got great talent. I've met all your folks, right? What have you done to keep people who are extremely well qualified? I want to add, right? I've been super impressed by them, right? How have they said we're in this mission with Mohit till the North Star is realized, right? It's wonderful. But I'd love to give me, not just me, but also aspiring founders a guidance of how you do this, have this followership.
I think the big thing here is in the search, is in the finding. I think a lot of the folks that are in Symmetry, I would bet that they are genuinely motivated by the North Star, but they are all intensely private people who are also intensely very competent at building, whether it is computer things or just programming things, or whether it is writing. So we have essentially lifelong fans of the problem that we have.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
So if you look at Claude, he was a CISO. He writes like a dream. He can synthesize the essence. If you look at Gopi, he's been doing 20 years worth of GRC focused on incident response and how does this come together? You look at Marcus, he's been doing visualizations of these problems. His whole thing is, can I build something that looks like Google Maps, but for your data and privacy? If you look at a lot of the core team, they built a lot of the initial prototypes, so they are naturally curious about seeing this through. So there's that part, which is the North Star and the skill set is aligned. But the second part is just customer delight is the oxygen. We've always had a policy that everyone is a forward deployed engineer by default.
Oh, wonderful.
You have to show up in a customer meeting to see the results of your work, to see how we don't sell to Crossbeam, we sell to Chris Castaldo. He happens to be at Crossbeam. So the goal is to delight Chris. We sell to Brian, right? Castagna at 7 Bridges now. So just to see how they respond and get that feedback back, I think that sets up the motivation loops.
Yeah.
I would say these are the kind of two things, one sort of long-term alignment and one more kind of frequent touch points. I would say these are the two main things. And the other thing is they are all really nice. I heard this phrase where you recognize your culture when you see other things that don't fit.
Yeah.
And we didn't even realize until we started going beyond 15, 20 people, what the not of us could look like.
I see.
So we spent actually quite a time just distilling down, and people have very long tenures, but that's because those are the distilled set of people who naturally are aligned to working really hard, getting meaning out of customer feedback.
Love it.
And love the long-term vision.
Awesome. So my last question is about, no, that's good. I think, so my last answer is my last question, and I can answer my side of this is what are your plans for RSA? It's coming up in a few weeks, and wanted to get your plans, just generally.
RSA is one of my 3 favorite events of the year. So we have planned an unconference for RSA, which is a conference around data plus AI security, right off of Moscone. It's on Monday afternoon. Please go to our website, check it out. But we are also hosting several dinners every night and lunches. But the key thing really is we have a spot. We are doing a lot of one-on-one meetings. And right before the conference, we have a customer advisory board. So we get all our core customers to tell us what they don't like, what they would like to see next.
I love that. That's authentic. I like that. So for me, I'm going to be hanging out. I'll probably come to your events. I'll go to a bunch of other, CISO type events. But I typically go to RSA and I sit at a coffee shop called Dela Coffee. It's a Yemeni coffee. And I didn't know this, but coffee was invented in Yemen. And so they make this super strong brew with a lot of spices, and I'm big into spicy. Think about like cardamom and cloves, etc. Right? They put that in their chai and their coffee, and it tastes amazing. And so I'm a foodie, and San Francisco is a wonderful town to get food. So I'm going to take this opportunity to be, kind of in my zone. It's about a half-mile walk from the conference, but most of my friends know where I sit. They come and hang out. So I'd love to have you come and meet me when you have some free time.
Absolutely. Thank you. And I'll absolutely be there.
Awesome.